Can you hear us, Jerome?
Can you hear us, Jerome?
Hashtag
He said
Jerome.
there it is.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Great.
Resources.
Hey, Barbara.
Hey,
Hey, Lori.
Hey, Kelly Wayne. JD.
Andy, this is what you look like up on the screen.
I know, right?
Yeah,
Like, hi,
yeah.
Jerome. So we appreciate you being here because we know we could talk all day long, and we've had so many classes on local in Nashville and what it takes to do Airbnbs here. And there was so much interest in what other markets are doing so that we can expand our portfolio. So again, appreciate you guys. Andy gave us a little taste of it in team meeting when he walked through his process of acquiring Airbnbs outside of the Nashville area. So I'm sure that's what his notes are there, is more of that, right, Andy? I'm sure it is.
You have notes?
Yeah.
You're supposed to.
This just says don't mess up.
Well, because Seth was coming, right? He was going to have all these little details. And before we get started, what question, burning question, did you have that you came to hopefully get answered today, so we can put it on the board and make sure they answer that?
Yeah.
And we don't get too sideways and you leave here going, I didn't get to ask the question. So anybody?
Who are you using to finance it based off of income,
Okay.
and not just personal income?
Right. Okay. I love that one. And y'all won't be able to read my writing, I'm sure. And we'll just move on.
Or just to bounce off that, creative financing options,
Okay. Great.
leverage.
I don't know if it includes it, but how long until you get to use that as income for the next year? You know, as far as, I know I've heard from the secondary market, they're not using Airbnb income, so like, how do I fix that?
How do I fix that problem?
I don't miss that. Okay. I love it. Ben.
I would say like zoning restrictions in different markets.
Okay.
How that's fair.
Zoning and
that?
restrictions. Love that.
Say, most recent changes that we should be aware of.
Okay. Changes. Love that.
Where do you see the future going?
The future.
No, that's
SDRs in Nashville?
Outside of Nashville.
These are secondary market.
We're talking about secondary market today.
Oh, we are, great.
Yeah. We've had like 3 sessions on the Nashville markets.
I'd like to hear how you guys picked the places. Like how you picked your cities.
Picture City.
Piggybacking on that, is there a site or a guide of hot secondary markets with low acquisition and high return? Backside of that question.
Yes, what Aaron's.
Because like Gatlinburg obviously was hot, but is it getting too hot? Like Nashville, where the cash flow isn't there, because like Asheville's opening up their downtown core, so
Right.
that's a good place to look into. The beach, especially like 38 is getting overpriced, so like that, or how you guys choose where to go.
I love that.
And then for like pro formas, are you using like a national management company for stuff like that, or are you trying to reach out locally?
That's about it.
Okay. Is that all? That was all of Andy's notes. I just know it.
just gave me my topic.
Yeah. Anything from, so while they're thinking and processing,
This is in
anything from
Spanish.
the folks who are virtual that didn't get covered on this list here? All good? All right. Anything else? Because we will use this as our outline, make sure we get this answered, and then if we have extra questions, we'll go from there. So sounds like a lot of information on where, how. Seems like the 2 hottest topics. So who would like to start? Andy, since you kicked this whole thing off, go ahead with the process.
Yeah, I'll start. And I think, when we think of investing outside of Nashville, or heck, even inside Nashville, right? We often talk about there's many kinds of investments. What do you want to focus on? What feels good to you? I'm excited to sit up here today because I know that what I'm talking about is different from what these guys are up to in a lot of ways. Meaning the short-term rental versus the long-term rental versus the fix and flip, the buy and hold, the whatever it might be. It's still investing outside of town, right? So me personally, a little bit about today from my point of view is the short-term rental market outside of Nashville, looking at Pigeon Forge in Gatlinburg, and then looking at 30A in Florida, which is a little strip of Florida on the Panhandle. And then other markets, there's Smith Lake, there's Broken Bow, Oklahoma, which I've recently gotten into as well. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from today. So just want to, that's my thought. What do you guys?
Yeah, so an area I've started to focus on more so, Steve and I work a lot of the areas together, but one area I kind of took on and pushed for us to get into more was the Chattanooga area, which 2 hours away from Nashville, 2 hours away from Atlanta. It's a really good central hub. It's also a city that was kind of more of a college city that's turned a little bit more into young professionals and a little bit tech-centered of a city. And up until now, their zoning and their regulations have been pretty wide open, almost to a comical sense. They're starting to get close to changing that. It seems like it's a little bit up in disarray right now, but even outside of short-term rentals, just the aspect of being able to do long-term rentals and kind of multifamily and out there, everything out there, the pricing is really achievable out there with pretty good turnaround in numbers just because of how quick the city's growing. So it's a good area to kind of get into to further understand and a good starter market. Like everything, when we get people coming in from Nashville and Gatlinburg, right now we're almost kind of pushing them a little bit closer to Chattanooga, especially if that price point isn't hitting right, or if they're looking for broader options, we'll start pushing them into that secondary market of something like Chattanooga, because while it's getting attention, it's not getting a rush of people like we're seeing in some of those other markets.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on Chattanooga, especially great market, and one of the first things you kind of have to do when we're working in those markets. If you're interested in investing in those markets, that's a different ballgame. But us having to work those markets, we try to make connections and build resources and have just understand that there's a infrastructure we can kind of put in place in those different areas. And for us, it's more up the mountains and then Chattanooga as well. So, like for instance, in Chattanooga, we already connected like early on with a group that was going there consistently and work in that area. They were doing a lot of their own investment, but it gave us a platform to piggyback off their resources and to not only find, but and then we also joined the MLS there. So that was an expense on our end to have to join. We were the first people with Keller Williams to join this market, or I guess at this brokerage, to join the Chattanooga market. So we took on that expense to get on board and get ourselves set up there. But between having the MLS access, between having the resources, I mean, it's a good way to come at it from both sides, so that we find out about opportunities that might be off market, which are always key, in those markets. And also, it's not, as Andy mentioned before, it's not always about short-term rental. It could be good opportunities in long-term rentals. There's plenty of people that have made a ton of money in long-term rental and investing in land assignments and wholesaling in Nashville. And those markets some of those markets kind of ripe for that too, if you know the right people. Picking up $1,000 assignment fee on a $100,000 lot, I mean, it's possible, in a lot of times in those worlds. But the Chattanooga we like a lot. The Smoky Mountains, it's been really good to us. We've kind of worked it since July of last year, and again, have the little resources in place that we could rely upon to leave showings for us. We're probably pretty close to actually having just a showing agent just that we're going to split with there in that market, as opposed to trying to juggle and go back and forth. But we bought a couple places there. We're purchasing the second one right now. So it kind of gives us a home base, and it also gives us a point of reference in that market. I know Andy owns stuff in different markets, so that always helps when you have a placeholder and you can tell people, yeah, I invest in that market. I don't know if you have anything to
Not too much on the market piece. I'll leave that to you experts. But one of the things I hear a lot at Keller Williams and in team meetings is leveraging your time. Right? So as part of everything that I would add to that is in doing so, you're going into these new markets. So obviously, I fall under the zoning restrictions and changes category of this panel. But having a business partner, whether it be a property management company that is already established in that market, who is going to know the zoning codes and requirements. For those of you who were in the team meeting, I guess that was last month, there was a lot of talk about just having a line of business partner and being able to work with those people to ensure that what you're buying and what you're searching for your client is going to be able to accomplish that purpose, right? I talked a little bit about how, you know, Chattanooga, they have some very specific STR laws like Nashville does that are pretty strenuous in my opinion. But nonetheless, it's obviously a hot market, and I would agree with all the markets that were addressed up here. But someone who can navigate that for you and be those boots on the ground in that city, it's always good to have a local contact. And then lastly, some of the things that I would probably touch on would be, as we get into this, would be kind of how to structure these deals for your clients to kind of maybe. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a real estate attorney at Collins Lugo and a partner at Track Title, but I do really creative business instruments and primarily focus on short-term rentals. So creating instruments to house these, not only the properties, but the permits there too, in order to ensure that maybe down the road, having a little foresight on what Metro Nashville might do or what a metropolitan city like Chattanooga may do in the future that is not going to frustrate any sort of grandfathering provisions or anything like that that you might be able to be subject to that could be taken away in the future. So yeah, that's probably all I would say as far as open stuff.
So Seth, out of all of the areas that were mentioned, Chattanooga, let's talk about Tennessee right now, right? And then we'll get to Oklahoma. Yeah, we'll get to the beach in Oklahoma, right? And why you chose that. So speaking of Tennessee, what are the most common mistakes people make with those instruments that you spoke of? Because we know you're an expert and you're the man that everybody in this room is going to go to. However, what's the one thing that you see across Tennessee?
So when I say specific instruments, okay, so let's talk about something that happened in Nashville. Most all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the phasing out of not owner-occupied permits in RM zoning, residential zoning, or RS, RM. What I did before the end of that phase out was instead I quit claimed 20 properties into an LLC, created an LLC to house these specific units, okay? So then I applied for permits in the name of the LLC. And at the time, we didn't really know how Metro was going to handle this, so it was a little bit more of cloak and dagger, kind of trying to hide the ball, not putting, you know, me listing myself as a registered agent and an applicant, things like that, not putting the homeowner's name on it. Well, January 26th, Metro had a short-term rental task force meeting that said that they not consider the transfer of the membership within an LLC to be a transfer for purposes of frustrating a not owner-occupied permit that was obtained prior to the phase out. So now it's not it's not all the cloak and daggers and all that kind of stuff. It's more so setting these up in a way. Now obviously that's over, but point being, now we're looking at, okay, what's the next piece that Metro is going to phase out? You know, is it going to be ORI? Is it going to be MUL? Is it going to be OR? Okay, well, instead of waiting to see what Metro's going to do and then waiting to see when legislation is going to get passed, let's go ahead and set these entities up this way to start with, okay? And then on top of that, it's just you have an LLC that's securing the property, so your client, they have that extra layer of insurance there and liability protection. So it's good for them. Some of maybe the downfalls and pitfalls that you might see in this, if you were to say that, oftentimes you look at which we have a really great lender for these types of deals that we've been working with, and I'm sure that that you all do too, or at least I know Steve does because we do a lot of work with Steve, Logan as well. But just wait on it, man. I was kind of waiting for a little chatter on that, but no, we. So we have a lender on that it might have to be a commercial loan if you're getting in the name of the LLC. So oftentimes, if you have a new LLC, well, there's not 3 years of financials, right? It's really, you don't have those qualifications and doc requirements. But the lender that I've been working with tremendously,
Who is who?
Randy Hulsey. It's Randy Hulse. what I said, RANDYHULSE. Thank you, I was getting ahead of myself. But yes, Randy Holsey at Pinnacle Financial, and I can share his contact information. Super great guy, but he knows how to work these deals, and yes.
He waives those requirements on the LLC for the 3 years.
So what we do is the name, the loan itself is in the name of the LLC, and then your client in the personal capacity would be a guarantor on that loan. So then that way we can apply personal financials to that. Yes, exactly.
And the idea is that you're not selling the property.
Right.
You're selling the LLC.
It's the member interest. So if Andy has 123 Front Street LLC, and sometimes that it's zoned to MUL in Nashville, and down the road they phase them out, and then I come along and I'm like, hey man, you got this great property, performance looks great, rent rolls are awesome, or not rent rolls, but booking rolls are awesome. I want to make an offer on this. Well, not only are you offering on the real estate, you're also offering on the intangible value of the permit, all the advertising, all the reviews, Superhost status. It's all of that.
Not being down that there's a gap period between permits, I mean, that's a big deal.
And it is,
Being
yeah.
down
So,
6 weeks.
What if you can't
but
get
if
it?
you can't reapply to, I mean, then it's there. It would frustrate the purpose of the transaction entirely. So, it's price point is substantially higher. But having a lender that you can work with to do that is super helpful. And then also another thing that comes up in these deals is the appraisals. Okay, so we go back to that price point. Generally, when you're doing these deals, especially these Nostra, not owner occupied permit types of transfers like I'm doing now for Steve and Logan and a lot of other people, that offer prices.
Not Andy.
Just not Andy.
Not Andy.
Thanks for bringing that back up.
Is that why I'm sitting beside you so I can do this? But
Mama?
but the price point is substantially higher than what the appraised value is going to come back to the property. So what you have to look at on this is definitely having some shortfall language in that appraisal contingency. Which you should have a copy of that from our last meeting a couple months ago. But having that shortfall language or having it not contingent on an appraisal goes back to the lender, and he knows what's going on, and we can make that work.
And Logan, he mentioned y'all's name, Steve, a couple of times. So what other lenders might they be writing down, because that's one of the questions up there.
So there's a guy named Wesley James over at Wilson Bacon Trust. He's doing a big package deal right now for one of our clients that's doing multiple of these that we're working through Cline with Seth. And there's a guy named Chris Deemster at First Bank up in, these are all commercial lenders, by the way. In commercial. Wesley James.
No, Chris
Beamster. Beamster. He's at First Bank up in Clarksville, but he's been able to pull rabbits out of the hat. We just did a 10% commercial loan on a $1.2 million property in Smokies, which is pretty impossible.
A commercial being that it was specifically purposed for revenue via Airbnb, because it's a residential house, but you're taking.
But it's an investment property, right? Especially if you're going to do not owner occupied. Yes, so they're going to consider that, and then especially in Nashville, they're tax commercial now, right? So whenever they're tax commercial, a lot of underwriters they see that, and I've had lenders try to couch these in traditional mortgage origination instruments. It does not work, and I've banged my head against the wall. I've tried. I've talked on the phone to agents at 9 and 10 o'clock at night for this one specific deal that's been the biggest thorn in my side, and it's simply because the lender wouldn't play ball. Yeah. So it's important to have that line of business partner in your pocket.
It goes back.
Great.
When you have the business partner, we're talking about investment properties. We're talking about second homes. We're talking about short-term rentals. As you guys know from being real estate agents, it's a different market. So if you're going to look outside of Nashville, you really want to try to find a partner or several partners that understand investment properties. Just because you talk to a realtor in the Smoky Mountains doesn't mean that they do a lot of volume, or just if you talk to a realtor at the beach doesn't mean that they do a lot of volume or they understand the market. Same with lenders. I mean, different, as you guys know, even from Nashville, different pockets of areas have different little nuances. I mean, a log cabin is financed differently than a traditional stick frame built house. It's just doesn't always qualify with every lender. So you want to make sure that you have someone who's aware of the ins and outs. Otherwise, you get to underwriting and all of a sudden the deal falls apart because the lender didn't understand what kind of product it was. Oh, I just was gonna say, so yeah, just make sure you guys when you're leading the charge, ask questions like how many properties do you have? What are you seeing? Who's your lender? Who's your doing short-term rental? Who is your cleaner? Who's your handyman? You can literally ask this of the lenders, of the agents. I'm probably on 6 or 7 different agent searches at the beach. Get them every day. I have a special email address just for all the rental properties, and they're all sending me similar stuff, same stuff. But it's just the more I get in front of it, the more I see, the more I call them and talk to them. I was on the phone with one of them this morning, just talking about her listing that a client of mine was going to make an offer on. It's just asking her questions, then calling another listing agent in the same development, asking them questions. Because there's a big assessment on this development. So, hey, what do you know about it? What do you know about it? The more questions we can ask, the more informed that we can be on our decision.
And that's what I was going to ask there as well. Oh, I'm sorry. I said, hey, hello, my name is Stevie. And that's what I was going to ask. Just so happened yesterday, I went through my Facebook page and I went to high school with this guy. And, I'm green. So I'm fresh out the gate. Don't know too much about real estate game here. My cousin was in it 20 years, flipping houses. So I figured I would give it a try and come to Keller Williams so they can assist me. They have the best training program there. So my question was going to be, how important is that lender? Because when I was in training and before I got my license, I was like, what is a lender? It just wasn't tying in with me. And then when I talked to him and then listening to you guys, it seems like your lender need to be your right-hand man, somebody that knows you, who's going to bat for you, somebody's going to answer the phone 10 o'clock at night. When they see your number, they are going to go to work for you and not let this deal fall apart. Is that what you're saying there about a lender?
Absolutely.
And personally for me, I have probably between 3 to 5 lenders I go between. I try to share the wealth as much as possible, but I still take meetings all the time with new lenders because I want to hear about new products. I want to see what sets you apart because no one is ever set within my business because they have to make sure to upkeep that relationship with me just like I'm going to upkeep that relationship with them.
It's tough because lenders are humans and we want to have relationships with them, and we do, but at the end of the day, they have products that they sell, and that product may not be appropriate for that situation. And it's got nothing to do with the relationship that you have with that lender, and they know that. So you just want to make sure, hey, what kind of product do you have for this? What can you offer this certain situation? So I agree. Have many contacts and understand what they do. It's not just a conventional loan, a FHA loan, a VA loan. It's like, what do you have? What products can you have that you're specialty in?
And just building off and kind of going back into your question there a little bit more too, the communication aspect. That's whenever I meet with a lender, that's my biggest thing. They can have the greatest product in the world, but if they're not going to communicate and my client's not going to know what's going on, and I'm not going to understand what's going on, and they're not going to give updates and provide that help and that guidance, you can have the greatest product in the world, but if I can't get a hold of you and my client can understand what's happening and I can't hold you to your dates, then at that point, I mean, it's just not going to be a good partnership. You're going to find yourself a lot more up in arms with that process, a lot more than someone you know and trust.
Sherry, let me piggyback off that real quick, just because, and then I'll take a question. So I got my start in residential and commercial lending. That's how I got going, Stevie, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything that was just said from Andy down to Logan, because products are important, but at the end of the day, you're selling a product. There's no one that's any sexier than the other. It's all about the person who's selling it to you, and it goes back to that relationship. So yes, everyone is going to have their products, but at the end of the day, if it comes down between a half a bip on one product from one bank versus another lender, but the relationship that I have with other lender, and I know I'm going to get the feedback and the communication that I need, I'm going to at least recommend that my client sacrifice that half bip because I know and have expectations on when things are going to get done. Sherry?
So along the same line of lenders, all the lenders you mentioned, do they learn on those really hard to live on property like 1865? The ones that are all investor owned.
Yeah.
Do they do that?
So the commercial guys always will typically. There's even residential lenders that are out there. Angela Martin at Human Mortgage is amazing at non-mortgage condos. And she's able to pull off a lot of rabbits. That's a lot of hats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Angela Martin.
She's on my preferred list too.
Yeah,
For residential.
She went-
Angela, she's on my preferred list.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of lending, since we're on that topic, before we get to the zoning and the project management, what is an example of creative financing? Because that was on the list of questions at the beginning. So give us a great example of something really creative that's gonna blow our minds and we're gonna leave here going, oh my God, how did that ever happen?
I mean, the 10% down loan that we just put off with the guy, Clarksville. So, again, this is on a $1.2 million property with Cookies. It's actually a partner and I that are purchasing it, but he was able to leverage the other partner's assets and say, hey, we're going to, if we go up, we can go up to a 90% loan to value this thing, but we may have to put a temporary hold on equity on another asset. And luckily that partner has about 100 homes. So it was like, Julia's not mine. So, so that was, that's a great example of a lender that was being extremely creative and still making the work.
Temporary meaning they couldn't sell the asset until the closing or for months after the.
It was like a 6 month.
6 months.
And then we're buying it like a little under market anyway, so we know that we're gonna have an appreciation in that. We should get a quick look from that, but yeah, but I thought when you brought that up, I was like, that's awesome. Dedicated.
All right, Andy and then Logan, give us your creative financing story.
I don't know if this is creative or not anymore, but a HELOC. It's simple. And everyone has all this equity that they've created in their homes and they think their homes are worth a lot more money, and they're not. You don't see that money unless you pull that equity out and put it to use. And so a HELOC is a great way, or home equity line of credit is a great way to pull out some value on your primary residence and go use that as a down payment on your investment property. And one thing to remember or consider is that whenever you get a HELOC, the bank that's going to be financing your next purchase looks at that HELOC as if you've used it all. So if you have a $500,000 HELOC and you haven't taken any of it out, they're going to think you have. And so when it comes to your debt to income ratio, just know it. So talk to the lender. Always be upfront. Be like, hey, I'm going to use a HELOC for the down payment. I think it's going to be X. How does that fit into my qualification? And they'll let you know. When I closed on a property in Florida, I told the lender, hey, I'm opening up a HELOC just for the next thing. I'm just getting it open, because you want to have a HELOC open to strike at a moment's notice, because the worst thing is like all of a sudden you're like, a deal. I wish I had some cash. And it's like, well, if you have the home equity line of credit ready to go, you do have the cash, okay? And so I asked her, I was like, hey, I'm going to open up this line of credit. Is that cool? And she was like, well, you don't need it for this deal, so don't let it mess up this deal by opening it up now. Wait until the deal closes. So literally I closed on the property on the 16th, the 17th I closed on the HELOC. And so just, maybe it's not a creative financing point, but use the HELOC.
Interest only payments too, for anything that you draw, it's interest only. But that's, I would completely agree. It's a very flexible instrument to be able to use, but the DTI and debt to value, a lot of people don't know that, and it will certainly impact.
When you refi that out down the road, and then you like back and you're draw clear again.
Logan, give us a creative.
Yeah, mine's more about creative acquirement rather than creative lending.
Oh, I love it. We'll mark that.
So we have a client that we're working with right now, and he is in the process of, he's actually going to end up being the end buyer on this. It's for 11 units on Dickerson Pike that are going to be short-term rental within a development. But what we did is we opened the negotiation because he's got partners, big investors around the country that are always kind of looking to get their name in the hats and just do creative ideas. What we did is we connected them with the builder that we knew this was going to be happening with. Our buyer is now actually going to be helping kind of put the money towards funding the finalization of the product. but he's also on the back end, that's gonna be kind of coming off of his op net number, what he's gonna be acquiring the properties for. So he's now going to be funding for the completion of this product. He'll pretty much have a say in how the finalization and the finishes are gonna look for it. And now he's also going to get some taken off on the back end to make sure he acquires that product. And it's a product that everyone's biting a bit to get, but part of the reason we're able to get that done and not let that go to market and get that figured out is because we said, would you guys be interested in kind of helping them finalize this product and get this product to the finish line? In response, they were like, yeah, if they can bring that to us and make that happen, we've now got the end buyer for it for 11 units on an area that's exploding. And that thing will never see the light of day because we kind of got creative with the aspect of opening that conversation to saying, here's a solution we can offer to help you guys get to the finish line of the build, just sell it to us on the back end. And they were all about that. So if you have those buyers that have that expansive financing and investors and stuff like that, find those different ways to kind of even help out what you're buying on the front end. If there is something that they're in the process of building, say, hey, are you guys missing any financing to get this to the end? Or are you needing another investor to come in and help get this to the finish line? You'd be kind of surprised because in this case, they're like, actually, we do. We need this set number. Our guy was like, okay, I'm all about it. Just sell it to me at the end. And they were like, yeah, no problem. And that was something to where a product could probably get it pretty good under market for what it was going to be by the time it went to market. But since we gave them a service, they were more than happy to pay us back on the back end there.
So Corey, I know you and Justin had a lot of questions on financing. We just got a little bit of limited time today, so I want to get us through all the stuff. Did y'all have anything else specific you wanted to ask them about financing before we get to the other
No, we just need to talk to the lenders about it. I don't expect them to know all.
So there's also DSCR loans. I mean, I've used one of those in the past. I'm sorry, Justin.
No, that was
No, that's good.
kind of where your question was headed.
Yeah, right.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I've done DSCR loans in the past.
Which
A lot
stands
of my
for?
clients have debt service coverage ratio. So they're basically loans.
Say that slower.
Debt, DEBT, debt service coverage ratio, DSCR loan. So there's a handful of lenders that can pull these off. The most recent one was with a guy named Austin Lyric with PRMG. They're great because they underwrite those in-house, whereas a lot of lenders that have DSCR loans filter them out. But the benefit of the DSCR loan is it doesn't really count against you in the back end. I mean, they qualify it based on the property itself. And as long as you got literally, not this last one, my wife, she has no income that shows on her record. She had a little bit better credit score than me. She got, a $50,000 house through a DSCR loan. But I've seen plenty of clients do that too. And you can carry up to you can get up to 15 different loans at the same time. They're these DSCR loans. So you can leverage across a lot of different properties as long as you can show that you can come 20% down. So the 20% down is the kicker typically. There's a bunch of guys around the country that do these. They're great assets. They're a little more expensive, but they're cool because you can build these up, roll them into LLCs, other instruments, and then but they're not really showing up on your own, hitting your own personal financials. Yeah.
I've been personal friends with Austin Wyrick since probably 2015, and I too would recommend him. He's a super great guy, and we have just started a relationship with him at Track Title in about the past 2 weeks. So, Wyrick, WYRIC.
He's a mountain of a man.
Yes, he is.
So giant. What's his first name?
Austin.
And we'll get all these names put on our Facebook page after we get done.
Just as a general rule, like as far as like the income part of the Airbnbs and how that's counted, like towards your debt to income, is there a general rule? Is it different with some of the lenders that you're talking about, as far as you can use this income to show, for your next income producing property?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like 90% of all lenders are residential lenders probably. Most of the residential lenders won't count any of the short-term rental income. Some of these other guys, or the commercial guys, few of the residential people out there, they can count short-term rental income as income towards that property. Otherwise, they have to say, well, that's just a second home for you, or it's we'll count the long-term rental income projection, whatever the long-term equivalent is, but not the short-term.
So where that gets weird is like in Gatlinburg and Pigeon because the lender's going to use long-term rental on a cabin. It's like, You tell me there's someone in there running long-term in a cabin. That sounds scary. So usually you try to find either a commercial lender or Pete Zaff with Movement Mortgage here in town does all of our stuff at Pigeon Forge.
Just for clarity, so I'm understanding what you said is like, if I were looking to buy a short-term rental in Florida, I could use the projected short-term rental income to get that loan?
You would hope it already had history. The best thing
Right.
is it already has the history.
Okay.
But yeah, there are lenders out there that will
Okay.
qualify it based on the SDR income.
I'm making mine some
And
lenders.
finding an appraiser who knows what they're doing for
Right.
short-term rentals.
Okay.
So the Zach Dorse Group, Z Dorse Group, he is my preferred appraiser. I've talked to Zach ad nauseum about this, and he is we're working with the Appraisers Institute or Tennessee Appraiser Institute, whatever it is, on drafting an article about appraising short-term rentals. But some very unique things that he talked to me about that I would have never thought about. Okay, so you've got Unit A, Unit B side by side. He goes in and appraises it. He looks at all the intangible values, the property, the quality of the Airbnb. Unit A, that's just it's standard staged investment property, nothing special, just nice staging furniture and great location. Well, Unit B, they've made it, Unit B, her daughter owns a chocolate store here in town. And so it's like, chocolate paradise in Nashville. And that's how it's titled. And you might think that's silly, right? No, because when he starts going and comparing the booking rates, the price of the booking, because now you're selling an experience. You're not just selling a door and 4 beds. You're selling, come to my chocolate lover's paradise. You're gonna get a free tour at my daughter's chocolate store. There's gonna be homemade chocolates waiting on you when you, I'm not advising or not advising on providing food or drinks or anything like that. But
it's chocolate.
It's
That's good.
well, it is claim.
Yeah.
It's homemade chocolate. But when he's appraising these, that's what he looks at. And that appraisal, that short-term rental valuation that he will do, I mean, he's told me there's been contracts that are anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 for units that are literally on the same street, just a few doors down. So knowing, having an appraiser who's coming in and doing that work for you, sometimes lenders are okay with you sourcing your own appraiser and saying, hey, I want to use this guy because he knows what he's talking about. Sometimes they're not. Again, it's going to go on the lender. But things to talk about with your appraiser and to go over whether you on buy or sell side, and to discuss and to think about.
That kind of touches on one of my thoughts that I had. When we think of investment properties, we always think buying your own home is this emotional process, and do I love the kitchen and the layout? And the investment property is all about the numbers, so the numbers work. I think for a bulk of these, it is about the numbers, but there is that emotional connection. If it's a short-term rental like at the beach, or if it's a short-term rental at a cabin, or if it's a specialty place, because the reality is you can increase your ROI by creating that experience and by having a nicer unit and by marketing. There's a cabin in Broken Bow, Oklahoma that sold way above where it should have. And the reason being is it had an Instagram account with 100,000 followers. That Instagram account sold with the house. And they created this experience. They created this emotional connection. And so while we look at investment properties by the numbers and run the numbers, there is a little bit of emotional connection for the people that are booking the place to come and enjoy the property.
And so that ties into one of the biggest questions about us talking about outside of Nashville. Why Gatlinburg? Why Chattanooga? Why 30A and Broken Bow, Oklahoma? So why?
I'll start on that. So I've always been an investor side. I've got a lot of investor clients around the country that hit me up. There's one of my former clients now runs something. His wife are like 29, they're retired. They have short-term rentals. And he makes a lot of money from doing this Airbnb Academy and this financial freedom stuff. He's been on TikTok and Instagram. Shoots me all his referrals, for Tennessee. But I get a lot of around the country referrals constantly. But I was working in Nashville. The limited inventory in Nashville is tough on the STRs. Everyone's looking for them. Regulations got some people a little wonky, but the Smokies are pretty wide open. So as part of that, starting to refer people to the Smokies, I finally got to the point I thought, let me just go figure it out. So that was July of last year. Logan and I went out there and we just started really working that market, trying to get resources and understanding. Sometimes going out there for showings, but that's not ideal. But when it's a $1.5 million cabin, I'll go there for a showing.
And for a vacation.
Yes, but yeah, so that's kind of what I picked up on the Smokies, and then it was pretty fruitful for me, right off the bat. And so I do still have enough oncoming referrals that I can, but I do need to figure that market out. I'm working way too hard trying to leverage back and forth.
However, from a financial perspective, if folks wanted to get started and they loved, as Andy always says, you gotta love going there, right?
No, absolutely.
You gotta love that experience. So from a financial perspective, that would still make sense for us to investigate that Sevierville, Pigeon, Gatlinburg, that area up there. Price point.
Yeah, price point is getting interesting up there. And I'm sure that's something you're going to touch on. Kind of part of the reason that I chose the market I did, but the price point up there is a little bit more complicated, and it has gotten more complicated recently up in there in the Smokies, especially if you're a starting investor. If you're someone that's seasoned and have different forms of financing to get out there, great. If you're newer, unless you've got like an inheritance or you've just done well with your money, it's a little bit tougher to get started out there just because the price points are a little bit on the higher for sure.
When you say more complicated, what do you mean by that?
Expensive.
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 I didn't know if it meant they're not cash flowing compared to the price, or
that's another thing. So sometimes in that market, if it's been ran by a management company locally, they will sometimes have 2 to 3 year contracts on those properties when you acquire them. And sometimes those companies aren't doing a great job of. You may see a house that's listed for $850,000 or $900,000, and it may have done $35,000 a year. And what you have to sit there and go and convince your investor is, this place can do $200,000. They just didn't market it. It's sometimes these places still aren't on Airbnb or VRBO.
Yeah.
They're running them through direct bookings, and it's impossible to find. So that's another thing. That can be another complication. Is you have to justify this price point to your client, even though the numbers may be here.
And so you chose Chattanooga because it's a lower entry fee.
Sure. And I'm a little bit more. He's more investor based. I'm a lot more residentially based. He's awesome with numbers. If you throw any number at me besides basic math, I'm going to look lost. But what I loved about Chattanooga was the aspect of the community feel and the growth aspect that was down there. You saw more families moving there. You saw more people coming there. And when you go to a place like Chattanooga, you have mountains, not as great as you maybe see in Gatlinburg, but you have mountains, you have cabins there, but you also have a river down below. You have a city core. You have parks. You have a bunch of different ways to approach it. So what you go for a little bit more there is the aspect of where that city can grow. And to be completely honest, some of the numbers you're seeing there in Chattanooga, it's not always the case, but I mean, you may see a property for half the price as compared to Nashville doing very similar rentals. And it's just because the buy-in price there and that market is still acquiring and moving a little bit more in that way. So what we got out there and did pretty early on was going out there and just scouting these neighborhoods where there's a lot of potential. We were like, okay, where's the next East Nashville? Where's the 12 South? We're even looking, where's the North Nashville? The place that still has a little bit to go, but it's made a lot of growth. And that's kind of what we try to go out there and acquire. And it does kind of, like he said, with driving out to Gatlinburg, the drive isn't the best, but we also did our due diligence on the front end and tried to find agents out there that could do the job. But after the conversations, we thought we could just do it better out there. We're bringing a different mindset. We're bringing more of a natural mindset and going out there. Eventually, we want to get buyer agents out there, but we want them to learn under us and understand it and not put complete strangers trying to work these deals.
How are you finding the properties?
We've gotten.
You can't be on there.
We already are.
Well, we paid for the access to it.
Yeah, we paid for the pretty
I
much.
did that. I was told on my last, but not totally. You couldn't be on
we were told that originally. We were so.
And then I came along and said, I'll do whatever you want.
Caitlin was helpful.
Well, we got in under Charles.
I was gonna say Charles.
Are we part of it?
We're part of.
Charles
So
did
in order to
the
be on an
Smoky
MLS, the brokerage has to pay as well.
Right.
And so to get Keller Williams and Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, Alan Perry and I split the brokerage cost to get Charles to sign off on it. And then from there, agents just you sign on underneath this market center and you're good to go.
So we can all sign on to Gatlinburg and Chattanooga now?
You would pay the
We just pay
fee.
their fee.
Are you regretting teaching this class to give away your secret check?
No, we're still working.
But to dive back into the last piece on Chattanooga and to answer your question, MLS, but then also we are just hitting up agents out there all the time. We're making connections off other Nashville realtors that work out in that area. And we're keeping what we work on a little bit broad. We're looking at long-term potential. We're looking at commercial potential. We're looking at heavy multifamily potential, and then also short-term rentals because
And development.
and development. Yeah, we've started diving into talking to builders out there because we want to kind of develop a couple of pockets to do what they're doing out there in Nashville, because you talk to people out there and they're a little bit unsure on what that would look like. So us being able to bring that guidance and that aspect to it, we think we could do some really cool things out in that market. Not turn it maybe into condos everywhere, but also giving more options outside of just single family housing.
We have opportunity.
Yes.
What part of Chattanooga are you thinking is best for STR?
So there's quite literally a map that shows you right now where you can do it. Now that's gotten a little bit tricky because they've now shut down.
You have the map?
Yeah, we can send you that. Yeah, we can send it. It's an
I
open.
want to property before the end of the, I have a goal here.
Sure. But that's gotten a
You
bit
can
interesting.
Google it.
Yeah, you can Google it, and Seth will be able to speak on this more, but they just kind of they kind of limited further permitting until the end of the year because it was so new out there. They're trying to understand how their zoning needs to work. And that's something that has gotten us looking a little bit more into the long-term potential until they figure out their short-term game. So
It was a tax revenue thing, and
Yeah.
they realized they were half the properties that were running on Airbnb weren't permitted because their regulations were a little lax.
Yeah.
And they thought, hey, we're losing on a lot of tax money.
Yeah.
So earlier, when you first started talking, you mentioned, hey, we're kind of looking forward, and you did mention Chattanooga when you made that statement. Are you saying that you're currently trying to figure out what they're talking about? Like, hey, these have the potential with the new legislation, so let's target this area based on what may or may not be coming?
Yeah, it's going to be an aspect of figuring out the overlay with that map, along with the new legislation, with the new zoning.
Because you said you did it here, but you looked into Chattanooga. I thought you had said.
Yes, we are, and track title is that's our next market.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed. That's how much of an opportunity we think it is, and agree with Logan on that point. In Chattanooga, my opinion is that I do not foresee the swing of the pendulum in the way it's swaying in Nashville. A swang word? I don't know. Swang.
Swang sounds cooler.
That feels good. Country
Swang.
slang.
Yeah, I was like, that's not
It's
right.
Nashville.
But the way it swung so far to it overcorrected. This is in a sense an overcorrection, slightly, but in my opinion, like you said, it's more so to figure out the regulation and how to capture that tax revenue and to put parameters around that and more so create a regulatory scheme that's going to be one that is going to be able to they gotta have to have a way to penalize people for bad actors, right? Because otherwise the city, there will be a massive fallout whenever market catches up. People figure out how beautiful the Sequatchie Valley is,
Sure.
and they start going there. So all that to be said, that is a word.
How you spell Sequatchie?
I can do that one. It's like Sasquatch with the E. But all to be said, so what we're doing is we're closely monitoring that. Also, I'm doing a lot of work with the state legislature. I have actually a call after this with Representative Cassida about working with the AG to try and work on some laws. So the state is trying to come in and attempted to, which if you watch News Channel 5 at all, Phil Williams pretty well ruined that. Great piece, but killed it. They tried to come in and overhaul it where the state could regulate STRs from a state level, basically preempting any other sort of metro or local law that happened in the future outside of the ones that had already been passed. That didn't happen. It failed. It didn't make it out of the Senate hearing committee. So all to be said, Chattanooga is doing a lot of unique things right now to try and correct that, but they're not tightening down in the sense on the ability to get a permit at a property within the places that Logan has talked about. I think they're just, again, trying to play catch up right now, and I don't think that that's going to be a permanent situation.
I think they just put a moratorium till the end of the year. I wouldn't even be surprised if they lived
That's
prior to
and
that.
that's what
They
I've
figured
heard,
out.
and that's the reason why I didn't even want to say the end of the year because I agree that I don't think it's.
Well,
gonna last that
there was
long.
quite literally a zoning out there before they stopped it. I think it was zone 3 or something that literally said you don't need to go get a permit. You could literally just run an Airbnb without even walking into a permit office. It was kind of like looking at it when we went out there. We're like, how is no one else really looking at this right now? Because the city has so much growth and so much potential out there. We talked to agents out there, and we would be like, "Oh, tell us about short-term rentals," and they'd start talking about cabins up on Lookout Mountain. We're like, "No, we're not looking up there. We're looking like right down here in the city core because, believe it or not, most of that city core can operate short-term rentals, which is wild because that doesn't happen in Nashville."
And that's the reason why Track Title wants to go there is because they don't know, and if you don't know what you don't know, it's not your fault. But somebody's got to be able to empower you with that knowledge, and so hopefully that's the goal is to be able to create opportunity for agents like you to be able to invest and grow your market.
And we've talked with Track, and we've also talked with a property manager that's moved out there focusing on short-term rentals, making those connections early on and having those people you can rely on to go for those pro formas and those numbers is a game changer. I mean, it changes everything in this scenario to be able to make sure you are prepared when yourself or your client comes to you asking for this advice.
All right, Andy, got a few minutes left, and then I know it would be just such a great opportunity to long-term break up into little mastermind groups, like the Chattanooga group, the Gatlinburg group. Anybody with me on this one as I'm creating it on the spot? And the 38 Florida Beach group, so that we could really dig into a lot more of the details. Today, we just wanted to give you an overview, but I just think it'd be good to have some little morning masterminds or conversations that come into those specific areas.
I think an emerging market group would probably be great too.
Yeah.
Because some of these are a little more saturated and maybe not as profitable.
That's right.
So far.
That's a great idea. So we'll have one each day. How about that? Andy, talk to us about the beach, and I'm all for it. The beach and 30A and why you chose that, and you're looking at Broken Oklahoma.
I just wanted to go to the beach.
Yep, there.
Seriously, it's like we had triplexes and duplexes in Columbia that we did the BRRRR method, and just buy and renovate and rehab, refinance and rent and repeat. Right, that's the idea. You pull your money back out and do it again. And there's a lot of that in Chattanooga, a lot of that in Knoxville, and it's really exciting and it's a headache and it's stressful. And so my wife and I were like, that's not fun for us. And so we sold those, got out of them, made a ton of money on them, and we have a couple of long terms in Nashville, and it was like, we want to go to the beach. So let's invest someplace that's fun for us. And we had this back and forth conversation between Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge and 30A. And the reason being is because ROI in the mountains is a lot better. Last year, it was the top 5 places by AirDNA, which is a company that measures short-term rentals. It was the only mountain place in the top 5, Smoky Mountains. And then Broken Bow is coming in at 17 for this year. We'll get to that in a second. But they're going to casino that. So, but anyway, but I knew that it's a 10-month and kind of almost an 11-month season now in the mountains, whereas at the beach it was always a 6 months pre-pandemic. And post-pandemic, it's moved into more an 8-month season. So you just have better ROI in the cabins. But I really wanted something at the beach, and one came along that just made sense, and I was able to get in on it. And I mentioned this before, as far as like you study the market like you do anywhere else, and you start to see patterns. And I knew that the lady that I bought it from, she grossed $40K the year before, and it felt low to me, and she only had it on VRBO, and which is not the main site people go to down there, especially. She blocked out a lot of March because she didn't want spring breakers in her price. Her numbers were low. And so I was like, I think I can make this work better. When we look at short-term rentals, long-term rentals, you often hear the 1% rule. Short-term rental is more, it depends where you are, but we might call it a 10% rule. That means that the annual gross revenue for the year is 10% of the purchase price. And if it's 10% or better, you're doing great. It's a good opportunity. Some might even say at the beach, you're looking at a 6 to 8%. And that's just I feel like that's more appropriate because of the enjoyment factor we have to remember why we're doing this. Like, I'm buying a place at the beach so I can also go enjoy a place at the beach. I'm going to get the place in Gatlinburg because I also want to go enjoy it with my family, create memories. And so for the current place at the beach, as of right now, we're booked through the end of July, and we're already over 60K for the end of July. And we have a long ways to go. And just so you know, I paid $608 for it. I was able to utilize my my buyer commission, so I'm getting my broker's license in Florida right now, but I still approached the agent and said I'd like to use the buyer agent commission towards my closing costs. She said sure, and that was awesome because she could have said no. Because when you're not part of the MLS, they have no obligation to you whatsoever. In fact, she came back later and said my broker said I shouldn't have done that. I was like, sorry about it. So I got to utilize that. My property, it didn't appraise, so we had to take some of that creative financing. Where basically creative finance at this point is just take some of my down payment and scoop it over a little bit, and made it work because I wasn't about to back out of this place. And it's done really well. And I think that from there, we're self-managing. So we have a program called Guesty, because the questions then become, how do I maintain it from afar? How much do I charge a night? I don't even know what to do. And that's fair. Those are all normal questions. And so you use a program called Price Labs. Pricelabs.com sets the price, and that feeds Guesty. Guesty.com is a channel manager. A channel is VRBO, Airbnb, Hotwire. Any of those are channels. So those all link up to Guesty. Guesty sets the calendar for all three of them, or for all of them. Price Labs feeds the price. And you can just see on Price Labs a bell curve of where you might want to price yourself based on, are you a new listing? And if you are, their strategy is just, literally in all capital letters, ours says new listing. Because that way they know, oh, there's no reviews yet, it's new, we'll give them a shot. So you price yourself on one side of the bell curve, and you get more listings. And all of a sudden, if you're the baller of the neighborhood, you've got 100 5-star reviews, you're going to slide up your slider, and Price Labs will adjust a 12-month period based on your new base price. Base price is just your average. And so for me, I chose the beach because I wanted to go there and enjoy it. I wanted to use this kind of investment property as a place my family can enjoy.
So you don't have a management company? Manages this cleaning.
The cleaner is your boots on the ground. You want to know them, like them, and trust them.
So you found one out.
She came with the unit. I'm the third guy. She did. She was like, because I mean, here's the thing: is like when I bought it, they were like, we really love it if you kept our cleaning lady. I'll keep whatever you got.
Right.
And so also with short-term rentals, they come fully furnished as well. So keep that in mind. Like,
Where's your unit?
It's in Seagrove.
Okay.
Right off 30A.
But I thought one of the cool things that you said in the meeting that I was at last time where we spoke was that she told you, hey, don't replace the sheets. They're good right now, but you need, this and that and the things like that. Like that was, I remember hearing, I thought that's really, like that intangible value was super awesome.
And you got to keep this in mind too. And I really, really, really admire you for showing properties again. But I'm never going to show a property at 30A. Like, you're right there. Book a flight. No. And so my people here, and they're not really investors, they're just everyday folks that are looking to buy a vacation home. You got to trust the process. I didn't see my place until I sat down in it on vacation. And I literally looked at my wife and was like, we have nice furniture. like we didn't pick it out. It just kind of came with the place. So you have to trust the process and just understand that,
There's a great color agent at 38. A great color agent right there at 38. Tasha Morgan.
Oh, yes.
She's amazing.
She is.
I would say that probably like 75% of my investor clients self-manage, or their objective is to self-manage. So they go into it with, asking us questions about the cleaners or property managers, not like a handyman type service, just somebody that can package that together.
And there's Facebook groups where like you can get on and go, hey, who are you using for cleaners? And that way you have like a backup option ready to go.
Now, are you guys self-managing your own?
ish.
Yeah, I have no intention of self-managing.
My wife doesn't want to do it, but, yeah, I mean, we'll probably actually with this new one, we'll probably go and bring somebody on board just because we're getting really good.
What are you guys seeing that self-managing costs to be? Is it like kind of similar in Nashville? Is it different in different markets?
It's higher in traditionally it's higher in the
Higher
Northeast,
means, what does that mean?
25 to 30%. I mean, Marriott will do it for
15 to
20%.
18 in
18,
Nashville.
yeah.
I have a lot of clients.
Yeah.
Somebody at
So,
15, that's why.
Yeah, I mean, 15 to 18 to 20% Nashville. I see that all the time. Smoky is like a completely or taking advantage of everybody. The property management people are, but and I
It
don't
depends
know.
on what they do as well,
Yeah.
because sometimes places will get booked for like a wedding event. And so that property management company might try to book your place because of the wedding event. I've got a client up there in Pigeon Forge that bought into this development with the property management company, and he analyzed his business over the course of the year, and a third of it came from wedding bookings or by this property management companies. Then you got to decide, do I want to give that up, or do I want to self-manage or switch to another company like Evolve, who's based out of Colorado. Evolve is 10%, but they do essentially the same thing, where they're partnering with people on the ground and just getting people over to your units.
Evolve is that national management company.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to
So-
touch on one thing that I didn't get to real quick, just
Okay.
about the changes in zoning, and this is for Nashville specifically.
Oh, no.
That's a different class.
That's a different class.
Well, this is
It's on the board.
It's on the board.
Well, we get outside.
And your Nashville Home Inspection partner, business partner, is a super great fella. But Nashville's changed their fire marshal inspection their process. So it's a private process. The fire marshal from the city does not go out. You have to schedule a fire marshal to do that. The fella, I don't remember his name. I've got his card in my car, but he was at the last meeting. I spoke with him for a good period of time about that, about what that process looks like and things like that. So if you have anything that comes up with your clients or that question comes up, just know. But that was the one thing I had to say today.
Please.
Last thing real quick, like about Florida, because in Tennessee, we all use the standard Tennessee Realtor Association form for contracts. In Florida, they have a couple different contracts that they use, and they really have big negatives if you get the wrong one. Things like your financing contingency is done after 14 days. So if you end up not qualifying, even if the house isn't appraised after 14 days, you're still host. So there's some really crazy things with the Florida purchase and sale agreement. So just make sure that if you're not the expert of it, again, it's another reason why to ask that agent you're working with, hey, how well do you know this? What are my pitfalls? Can I get out all the things you think you can get out of? Because in Nashville, you can't get out of because of Florida. Just know that contract is good point.
All right. Who wants to come back next week? Well, if they clap, that means I know we've got more to talk about. So be on the lookout on the Facebook page for more stuff on the areas and these great guys. Thank you.
Before we came here, you saw 2 deer.
You're like, yeah, call me, and then I was like,
What these guys do,
we have a property in East Nashville that we technically got, as our property.
yeah, Oklahoma grows my first started because my wife did
Not necessarily. There's a whole can of worms that I didn't even want to about that.
It's a gorgeous area with lakes and hills and trees.
So
It's really highly unregulated.
yeah.
It's 2 hours north of Dallas, so a lot of money
we have
is
to
out
leave a
there.
conversation
From Dallas, and then they're looking at a casino getting built there.
The reason why I have a call with representatives not after this is because they're in a drafting area right now. It technically says the transfer of property from your individual sale to your LLC is not a
That's gonna be
transfer
the
of
hardest
property.
one because again, it's like people are gonna buy the furniture over the summer. Housing
The question becomes though is if I would
it's
zone,
nice to
can
see
you
that that
get
should
not
not
under
Oh, yeah,
contract
yeah.
permit now
Yeah,
and
I was
then
like,
space
yeah,
out?
for us,
No,
like,
that doesn't mean, again,
I
there's
love real
some
estate.
things
Yeah,
to look at there.
sure.
I would have
Yeah.
more
So I was like,
property
I got
zoning
nice guys,
issues.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So what would it entail for a legal consultation, like is it a certain amount of time?
There's a
Alright, so we'll schedule that, because then also, one decided is under Seth's name, so we're trying to figure out.
Are they,
about
is it A and B?
They're all so you get 21 and 22.
All the money and revenue.
Yeah, so we're gonna look at that too.
Especially if it's a town that could have an ST, you know, like,
Right.
I
So
could
we
go
need
home
to
class,
look at-
I go class all the time, that's the reason why I'm looking at it.
So, and then and then like we reach out to a lender, if you wanna get to
Financially,
flipping, and I wanna get that into
getting
it.
another $1,000 a month.
But right now, because, and like this was a very generic residential lender,
Yeah,
I called it, I was like,
And word of mouth,
yes,
things
it's what he knows, but I'm like,
traveling
I'm
nurses,
the worst
they all
client,
talk to each other, and then it's like
And
stay
then,
hooked up.
my
I
friend
have
has three,
companies,
she's
you
a
know,
software
booking for
developer,
30 days for
his
employees,
stuff is
engineer,
nice.
train,
They have
So-
Airbnb,
So like this place up
and
in
he's
Frye,
like, well, all
like
this
it's set up in a
is
nice,
not
yeah.
houses. So now we're trying to
Set
figure
up
out
as
what our next
I've got a
steps.
good residential, Randy,
That's cool.
when I was
It's
a person,
Oh,
Randy
yeah.
says,
Creating that
yeah,
experience.
Randy, did you run
But if you guys maybe
I
notice
gotta
more,
see, I
like,
gotta
I've been,
go.
I haven't
I
had
didn't
any
get
introductions
Austin
yet.
alright,
I've
but-
I think like that's him, and then Jackie heard this playing a lot.
just going to the idea of like, instead of doing long-term rental
I see him
normally,
more.
just doing
I
$30
know
rentals.
some of the stuff that
I brought that up to several of my guys. I
If I start sending it to like my residential guy, he was
Some of them
trying
bought
to
them originally.
But like Austin and those,
and like he wanted to cover income.
Oh, God,
offset.
yeah.
Because he was like, well, you want income to count, and I was like, well, we've got income, the problem is the debt is coming against us that we don't pay for.
I met Austin at the Ribbon Pool after my 1 year of law school, and he used to do it like he's a crazy yes guy. He's like, let's figure out solutions, you know. And that's why he and I hit it all in ran their percentages. So when I say that that's somebody who's not potentially can't do this, you can't do that, he's gonna be like, okay, here's the issue, here's our options, what can we do, what do you, what
And I
part do
actually
you
switched
really
over to
want,
that.
what's gonna work, and that's what you do.
Yeah, because a lot of people have said your best bet is commercial or hard money
Because I'm a
lenders.
short-term rental
Finding the
company
right
in town.
Well, Brandon be good commercial, Austin,
That
that's
point,
more closer to
for
our
somebody
money,
to
heavy rates are higher, but it's depends on the way they do their hiring.
Yeah. And when I
Well, and that's what I'm saying too, for looking at flips, and they don't care as much about the interest rate because it's a holding policy, so they're looking to get rid of it.
Yeah, and then that's the big thing with hard money, you know, I mean, I've got a hard money lender that's probably 15%, but you're gonna pay us like,
even though most people were very respectful of it,
so I mean, I can play with that guy too, but it's anything development for the rest of your but if you get
and every once in a while you get
$600,000
somebody
loan,
a little bad, like, or
15%,
they have a dog,
it's just like we talk about this, he bought something that's only, you're only gonna be paying back like $9,000 a month until you leave the home, then you pay the loan off plus any additional interest. So it's, I mean, that's hard money for a reason, right?
Yeah.
They need.
Alright, well, let me get, what would be the best
Oh, yeah.
place to
My
schedule
experience
a
is
Call Mary Catherine at 615.
We've had experiences with it. People have been really romantic on this place. Especially nurses, they're never there. They work so much, they're not under anything. You know, I mean, it's very little.
736.
It's interesting though, I'm always amazed when I hear about people that have properties outside of Nashville.
And this one, Grover's been working on this,
It's
a
almost
lot
like,
with the other funds, so ask her, tell her, it says that's, that's set to talk.
Because Jolton and I were, you're not under the county, right?
No, but it is different. So Jolton is the furthest north. That's where you are. When you get off the Jolton.
Okay, and where's the location for y'all?
We're downtown, and
Like
we're
from
probably
the
looking to
exit
virtual.
So like that's where
and
it's just a
dial
straight
We
back,
have a
shot
property downtown.
So actually like,
whatever
it's,
works for you.
Okay,
I
thank
would
you.
say, it used to be about 15 minutes, now it's probably
Come on,
20,
man, we gotta go.
25.
Good
Which
to
still
see
is
you.
not
Good to
bad.
see you. And I enjoyed it, yeah, it was fun.
Permit for long-term. All right, you just have to file, but
There's a
Yeah,
lot
but
of
no,
things to
actually,
talk
they
about it.
still.
I was
talking
wondering if it's
because
Airbnb.
Andy's-
Yeah.
They started cutting us off.
It's a company
Yeah,
like I manage
no,
artists
that's,
and
that
they
totally
moved
could have been
and
a
they
2 or
weren't sure
3
what they
hour
wanted to do.
panel. I mean,
about
just
it. I
zoning
did
in
the
and of
space
itself
purchase
with all the changes.
and was
that's
living there
happening,
on
and that's-
property.
I
It worked
just
out this cool
wanted
deal of
the
like, hey,
fire
they weren't sure what they
inspection
wanted to
thing
do.
to been holding
I
a lot of
basically
permits
ran this
because
Airbnb
they
and was
get,
paying my
metro
lease
this shit
plus
does,
some.
tells
So
you-
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and I did that
good
for
for
like
you.
2 years, and then they ended up
Yeah.
it was still getting me 60 people.
What I expected.
And then like sports, and I was like,
The way our deal worked, it was kind of like this is gonna get bad. And so I just,
Yeah.
so that's why I moved from there. I still kind of helped
Yeah,
them
it's,
like
and it's
manage
not
it.
even
And
about
thankfully,
this
I wasn't like,
itself,
you know, I
it's
invested all
just
this
about
money
the
to
audit
live
and the
here
concept of
because
how
I
to
didn't
start
start
the
this
process
business.
to
It
get
covered.
there.
I was like,
so
you
you
know
keep
what?
looking at it.
I have living expenses for
Oh,
2 years.
yeah.
That's a clean slate. And so I took that money
Yeah.
and I bought a house in Cleveland. On the radio. So
Yeah.
like, that's where I'm doing all my investing.
Well,
And so-
anytime you guys head down there, man.
Yeah. And I love the neighborhood. Like I genuinely like I live there and I like it. And so like that's also
very
a
much.
draw.
I mean, we're looking at like.
But
I wish I would have, taken advantage. I wish I would have.
I'll go over. I'll go down there. I'll start the
My
office.
girlfriend, so,
She loves
like, I didn't.
I do
think
too,
had,
man. Like, I mean, I really do,
enough
but
knowledge and
that's,
enough,
it's also, I mean, it'd be
confidence
a,
to go
start a
and
long
get
to
to
do
do
that
that
stuff.
stuff early on. But I know so many people
So
that pick
it would
up
be,
lots
it
over
would be
there
a good
or,
decision for me.
properties with the tear down on them or renovate the front, build them back. And
Because it's so SP for that.
Well,
So like that's
yeah,
the place I
exactly.
bought is not because it's great. And like you look at it and I told you like how much I paid for it.
You did, yeah,
That seems like a lot for that
So
little house,
he's,
but I'm like, the truth
Matt
is,
who
if I
travels
didn't,
and
if
he's.
like remodeled the house,
Right,
had like a dorms on the roof upstairs and made bigger rooms and added the admin and did about 250,000, which is a lot. That's a new house basically.
What are you doing on the city? Oh, they don't really allow it. I'm like, yes, they do. Like, they do. And I don't think people just.
They don't know. They truly don't. It's a foreign concept. It's
Anything
natural.
I'm reading in that
STRs,
neighborhood,
actually,
they're right off,
Airbnb,
they're
you know, but McAdoo's from Nashville, so McAdoo, he,
Whereas
he's
before,
not
it was
drinking
so
it.
hard.
Yeah, growing up
If you
drinking
ever try to get out
Chattanooga
the
water.
road, to break that, I can't believe about 20, or Nashville on the 5 point.
Yeah.
I feel like being out there, Chattanooga, as
Where
a
it used
whole
to be
city
such
is
a
far
rare
more
thing.
affordable than
Oh,
Nashville.
and also
Yeah.
lots of
You know, it's like
people
those
money.
I was just there
Bought this whole
2
church.
weeks ago,
And
or
the next
a
year or
month
two
ago
we'll be
maybe, and then I was
remodeling
in
it into
Chicago 2
luxury,
weekends
like,
ago.
It'll
And
be
then
the
just
house that'll
comparison
push the
between
market
Chicago
on that
and
street.
Nashville,
But I'm like,
man, it's
I already know like Cline's doing the dirty work for me.
Yeah.
So I was like, I had that insight to know like, yeah, I'm gonna buy this one because I know I'm helping them sell that one and I know what we're gonna list it for. So it was
Yeah, that's like an extra
Yeah,
100K of appreciation on top of what I have.
I stand right across from that
So,
dog that.
but no, yeah, I
that
was,
dog
I'm just
park.
because
Yeah,
because I've got more on the investor side. People been asking me, oh, I want
First
Airbnb.
one,
I'm like,
confusion and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, that's exactly,
But I'm
yeah.
like, but I've been pushing
It was a
this, like,
super great little
buy it
place,
as a
great
30
hostel,
days.
nice there, I've ever stayed in, but.
So I would, I know
yeah,
like you guys obviously
it's-
be going outside of town, but like that's what we're really kind of pivoted everything in Nashville to maybe that.
Because any property,
The whole reason why I said, yeah,
Yeah.
we're all.
You don't have to own your own house. You don't have to be, you know,
Or even just
I mean,
little
and that's an
pieces,
area
you know,
that,
I've got to jump on that call at 2:15,
And-
fellas, but yeah, let's connect, man, and chat. How's that bottle of wine?
We crushed it.
Awesome,
Thank you
man,
so much.
awesome,
That's
yeah,
what
no
I'm
problem,
talking about.
congratulations.
Thank you.
I was
Yeah,
talking to
yeah.
Renee up front,
So
she's
it's
like, yeah, we
like
just
about
went
the
down, I was
10%
like,
whatever they pay.
that's
Ultimately,
That's
it's
all.
like,
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah,
We just got a bar cabinet set up yesterday, so
there you go.
we're getting everything all set up.
I've got to get on that call, Boone, we went on a walk before we came here, and he saw 2 deer.
Oh, yeah.
So he's got stick lights everywhere.
I was gonna say he's got these little
Oh,
chicken things.
he chased 2 deer before we came here. That's why we were about 3 minutes late, is because,
Oh, your color is so good.
Oh,
You're
that
chasing
is-
after-
yeah, always.
You're real flush, chasing after Boone.
well, yeah, I really enjoyed it, Steve. Thanks for letting me come. I think that, we could.
So Logan mentioned that guy that finally we're working with you.
Yeah.
That's also, so I mean, I have a feeling he's gonna be like working.
So I'm working with Jake on his equity capital and I guess all that, the documents and everything, to get all that going. That's one of the things I have on my afternoon to do. So yes, I think that that's as a result of what that is. I've got a whole list of emails, but that is, I've got to call him. So
That's a 15-month process. I mean, it's not gonna be these quick
So
for that, but I mean, I'm
maybe,
trying to get
maybe
involved.
there's something else that, or maybe it's getting all the documentation in line so they can start the funding, or the cash drive, I think maybe might be.
Because they're looking to still contract now, or at least put the partnership with the
That's what it
JV
is,
together.
that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's the JV and partnership agreements.
He's got a 215, so.
I've got, Representative, Cassido is trying to get me to submit a certified question to the Attorney General. So, I'm sure we talked to y'all about how the law is currently asked backwards and that transfers are from you to your LLC is not a transfer pursuant to the short-term memory act. So, I worked with legislation with Jack Johnson during session trying to get that fixed. They killed it. Now I'm working with the Cassido to try and get the AG to fix it. But we're about to file an onslaught and
The stuff like that can either.
exactly because it was good. Or they had a permit, they transferred it, and then they pulled it. All right, so you had a permit, you transferred it to an LLC in 2022. If you were grandfathered in under RM20, that shouldn't have been a transfer. That LLC should be able to maintain the permit. I've got 2 or 3 cases like that I'm going to file appeals on. So we're it's more of a policy thing, really. But I mean, yeah, it'll be good legal fee, but it's more so there's so many of these folks. So hopefully, if that's the case, we can. I mean, that from a chancellor. That's that obviously, yes. I'll keep you guys in the loop. But if that if we get from that chancellor, that the law is the way that it is. Ooh, it's about to get real. For at least until I can see them having a special session about requesting legislation going back in a special session to fix the law. I'm trying, man. I'm trying to get it done. We'll see you guys. I appreciate y'all. Oh yeah, we talked about earlier.